further down. So that's a very different issue, but it adds about the prices, the pricing of technology. Okay, so I think let us throw the panel open. The panel is definitely about technology. It centralizes technology and it talks about the nexus of technology, governance and development. So I will invite Dr. Sreekumar to begin his pitch. Yeah, if you want, you can speak here or there. It's up to
you. Okay. The sustainable development goals, while envisaging certain key breakthroughs by the end of the next decade, particularly in areas like elimination of extreme poverty, providing basic education and healthcare to all, etc., seem to be uneasily focusing on communities which earn their livelihood in the growing informal economies of the global south. And informalization of the economy is a grossly material fact. There is data suggesting this trend. In a certain sense, all goals are interconnected. But at the same time, it must also be noted that with respect to the first set of goals that address the prospects of attaining better living conditions for the urban and rural poor, attention is on the improvement of the quality of the economic environment in which they seek their livelihood. This is precisely where many people would argue that information communication technologies can play a vitally significant role. If we borrow a term from development economics, which is not very fashionable these days, development economics in fact actually talked about real people, like Walsham was mentioning, and real issues for that matter, before ICT 4D. If we borrow a term from development economics, we can see that the SDGs are essentially primarily trying to urge to break the vicious circle of poverty. For this, most interventions envisioned in the SDG framework tend to see a leading role for the state, but particularly in terms of as a provider of social security measures, deploying a massive welfareist infrastructure. I'm not saying that this is the guiding philosophy of SDGs, but you can see that there is a clear direction that is taken in terms of understanding state's role as a kind of welfare innovator. But the state's role cannot actually be reduced to one of providing welfare policies, formulating welfare policies. This actually calls for more direct interventions in terms of job creation and entrepreneurship development in the informal economies. The emerging ICT information communication technologies, like for example, mobile broadband and Internet of Things, perhaps, can be of huge help here. I mean, I'm not undermining the significance of those technologies. But at the same time, it must also be taken into consideration that the government has to actually step in by accelerating investment, public investment. And if you look back in India's history, you can see that many of the poverty reduction programs, what they have achieved, much more has been achieved in the 70s by increased public investment by the central government and state governments in India. The second issue is actually about rural credits. In the agricultural sector, for example, we have seen in the past 2 decades, after the ICTs were introduced, it is true that the ICTs have been playing some significant role in helping farmers. But at the same time, the interlinkages in the credit market in India work totally against the small and marginal farmers. it is true that the big capital farmers are able to leverage, or they are better equipped to leverage the advantages of information and communication technologies, or any technologies for that matter. And it's a good thing. I'm not against that. But at the same time, it must be noted that the small and marginal farmers, the benefits are just being notional. And in order to address this anomaly, I believe that the state has to intervene in a big way. Not only in terms of ICT infrastructure, but also in terms of accelerating investment that help creating jobs and also economic opportunities in rural areas, particularly in the informal sector. Given the neoliberal, kind of economic regime under which the governments operate, it is clear that the states may not have the kind of financial and logistical resources to address this issue. But at the same time, if SDGs have to be kind of brought into focus, tremendous state initiative, both as an economic kind of innovator and provider of supporting systems. The onus is always on the government to design and deploy the infrastructure and also the supporting systems. And this is all about the economic domain. But before I conclude, I have only 1 minute left, I think. Before I conclude, I must also mention that it is important to stress the social structure in the global south, particularly in India. People who have actually approached understanding rural technology diffusion has stumbled upon this fact that social structure is a basic impediment in the diffusion of these technologies. We cannot actually talk about technological advances in the rural areas without talking about caste, without talking about the social structure that permeates rural areas. So there are a couple of issues that I want to flag for discussion in the limited time span available for me. One is actually reinventing the role of the state in a very different way if we are actually targeting seriously pursuing the SDGs. I know that there are a lot of criticism about SDGs that I'm not actually bringing up in this forum today. Those are also important, but maybe another conference, another occasion, we'll be there to discuss those issues. The issue of social structure, the issue of agency. Agency is important, but at the same time, structure is also an important aspect. I mean, agency bereft of discussion on structure will be futile. So that is the two issues that I want to bring up in role of the state and also the need to understand the social structure better. Thank you.
That was wonderfully sociological. You brought together Anthony Giddens' structure and agency together. Wonderful. So now I will